Good evening, I'm John, and this is John News. Tonight we turn our focus to the highest court in the land, as the United States Supreme Court prepares to issue rulings on some of the most consequential legal battles of the 2025-2026 term cases that could reshape American law and affect millions of everyday lives as the court advances toward major decisions expected in early 2026. Legal analysts, lawmakers, and citizens are paying close attention to a range of disputes that touch on immigration, presidential power, voting rights, separation of powers, and more. Each of these cases carries high stakes not only for the parties involved but for the nation as a whole, and tonight we break down what to watch and why it matters. At the center of the court's docket is a case that could redefine one of the most fundamental elements of U.S. citizenship: Trump v. Barbara, a legal challenge to a presidential executive order that would limit birthright citizenship guaranteed under the 14th Amendment. If upheld, the court's decision would overturn more than a century of established precedent and change the constitutional landscape for children born on American soil to non-citizen parents, a move that has divided legal scholars and policymakers and could have far-reaching implications for immigration policy and civil rights nationwide. Axios Police 1. Another pivotal case involves Learning Resources, Inc. v. Trump, and related consolidated challenges that question the president's authority to impose sweeping tariffs under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. Critics argue the law was never intended to be used for broad economic policy and that Congress, not the executive branch, should set trade policy. The outcome could restrict presidential power over trade and reset the balance between the White House and Capitol Hill. Bloomberg Law. The High Court is also expected to revisit issues of separation of powers in disputes over presidential removal authority, including Trump versus Slaughter, a case that could determine whether Congress can limit a president's ability to fire leaders of independent agencies without cause and potentially reshape the structure of federal oversight, impacting agencies like the Federal Trade Commission and others whose work affects everything from workplace regulations to consumer protections. Bloomberg Law. Voting rights and representation remain central to the court's docket, with Louisiana versus Calais, a case challenging how Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act applies to racially drawn congressional districts. Opponents of the state's map argue that minority voters gained unfair advantage, while supporters say the law protects minority representation. A ruling for either side could significantly alter redistricting standards nationwide and influence the political balance of power in Congress. Wikipedia. Civil liberties and equal protection issues are also on deck, with cases testing whether laws regulating transgender athletes' participation in school sports or bans on conversion therapy for minors violate constitutional guarantees under the First and 14th Amendments. As the justices consider these questions, the real-world impact will extend to schools, families, and state legislatures across the country. SCOTUS blog. In addition to headline cases, the Supreme Court is reviewing disputes over criminal justice and sentencing standards, such as Rutherford v. United States, a consolidated petition addressing how sentencing guidelines should be applied when courts have conflicting interpretations, which may affect how judges consider rehabilitation and disparity issues in federal sentences. Wikipedia. These major cases come as the court itself faces scrutiny over its role in American democracy, with Chief Justice John Roberts affirming that the Constitution remains firm and unshaken ahead of these pivotal rulings, underscoring the judiciary's duty to uphold the law as political pressures continue to swirl around the court and its decisions. New York Post legal experts say the rulings expected in early 2026 could define the constitutional contours of presidential power, immigration rights, voting protections, and administrative authority for years to come, and that regardless of the outcomes, the debates emerging from these decisions will shape public discourse and influence policymaking at every level of government. And as Americans await the Supreme Court's rulings on these landmark cases, the nation stands at a moment where legal interpretation, constitutional guardrails, and political reality converge, because the decisions issued from the bench will not only resolve specific disputes, but will echo through the halls of federal power, affect the direction of public policy, and frame how rights are protected or limited well into the future. And from John News, that is your comprehensive update on the key Supreme Court cases to watch in early 2026.